Get out of my house, Tyler. I never imagined I'd be the one saying those words to my own son. But there he was, standing in my living room in a tailored suit, looking every bit like a man who thought he had it all figured out. My husband had been gone for only 4 hours. This was the same son who had walked away from me 15 years earlier when I had nothing left to give. Now he was back, and the timing, well, let's just say it was suspicious at best, because something happened at that funeral. Something that would change the way I looked at him forever. What Tyler didn't realize was that my husband had been a lot sharper than Tyler ever gave him credit for. When Tyler showed up at the lawyer's office 3 days later, he thought the outcome was already in his pocket. He believed he had outsmarted everyone, that every loophole and technicality was working in his favor. But he was dead wrong, even now. I have a hard time believing how it all unfolded. What I can tell you is this: when we left that room, only one of us was smiling, and it sure wasn't Tyler. My name is Gloria, and this is the story of how everything I thought I knew about family, loyalty, and justice got turned on its head. But first, you need to understand where it all really began. Because this didn't start with Vincent's funeral. It started years earlier, back when I was killing myself working double shifts just to scrape by, and my son decided I wasn't worth sticking around for. I was wiping down that sticky counter for the 3rd time when the bell above the door jingled at 2 in the morning. The Roadhouse diner was usually dead quiet by then, except for the odd trucker grabbing a cup of coffee. But when I looked up, it wasn't a trucker. It was my son, Tyler. And from the look on his face, he'd have rather been anywhere else in the world. His spotless designer sneakers squeaked against the cracked linoleum as he made his way toward the counter. I'd been on my feet since 6 the evening before, and I still had 4 hours left before the next waitress came to relieve me. At 50 years old, those back-to-back shifts were wearing me down, but the bills weren't going away. Mom, we need to talk. His voice had that sharp edge I'd been hearing more often lately. I poured him a cup of coffee without asking, the way only a mother of 25 years would know. Black, 2 sugars, just like always. You're out late, honey. Everything okay? Tyler ran his hands through his hair, that same nervous habit he'd had since he was a boy. Look, I need to borrow some money. Just for a little while. My stomach tightened. Tyler, you still haven't paid me back from last month, the car payment, remember? This is different, he shot back. It's an investment opportunity. A friend of mine made a fortune with crypto. I just need $3,000 to get in. I froze, rag still in my hand. $3,000. Tyler, I don't have that kind of cash lying around. What about your emergency fund? The way he said it made the hair rise on my neck. How do you even know about that? His face turned red. I saw your bank statement on the kitchen table. Mom, you're sitting on $3,000 while I'm stuck in that dump apartment, driving a car that barely runs. That money is for real emergencies, I said firmly. Like when rent goes up or if I get sick and can't work. This is a real emergency, he insisted. Do you want me stuck in this nowhere town forever, working in places like this? He waved his hand at the diner with open disgust. Heat rushed up my chest. Places like this put food on our table. This job paid for your college tuition at least until you quit. College was a waste of time. Traditional education is finished. Mom, you've got to think bigger. Bigger, I snapped. You've been thinking bigger for 5 years while I've been breaking my back to keep us afloat. He leaned across the counter, lowering his voice. That's exactly the problem. You've always thought small. No wonder Dad left. Those words hit me like a fist to the gut. I gripped the counter just to steady myself. Don't you dare bring your father into this. Why not? It's the truth. He got tired of your attitude, your acceptance of mediocrity just like I am. I stared at this man I had sacrificed everything for and hardly recognized him. Your father left because he couldn't handle responsibility. Don't twist the story to make yourself feel better about stealing from me. Stealing? His voice rose, and I shot a nervous glance toward the kitchen, praying my manager wouldn't come out. I'm your son. Helping me should be your priority, not clinging to a pile of money like some paranoid old woman. I'm 50, Tyler, not dead, and that money stays put. He shoved his chair back so hard it scraped across the floor. Fine. I'll figure it out on my own. I always do. He stormed toward the door, then spun back for one last jab. You know what your problem is, Mom. You're so scared of losing the little you've got that you can't see an opportunity if it slapped you in the face. You're pathetic. The door slammed, the bell clanging behind him. I stood there, shaking under those harsh fluorescent lights, staring at his untouched coffee cup. By the time I dragged myself home at 8 that morning, I headed straight for my dresser. The small metal box where I kept my emergency fund was still tucked inside the drawer, but when I opened it, my chest went cold, empty. My hands trembled as I grabbed the phone and called the bank. After what felt like hours on hold, a representative confirmed what I already feared. Yesterday afternoon at 3 o'clock, while I was still working my shift, someone had withdrawn $3,000 from my savings account with my debit card. I sank down on the bed, staring at that useless, empty box. Tyler had stolen my card. He'd taken every last dollar, and then had the nerve to sit across from me at the diner asking for money he'd already pocketed. My phone buzzed in my hand. A text from Tyler. Mom, I'm sorry it had to be this way, but you would never have understood. This investment will change everything. I'll pay you back triple when it works out. Trust me. Another message followed right after. P.S. I'm leaving town for a while. Don't try to find me. I need space to figure things out without your negativity dragging me down. One day, you'll thank me for having the courage to think bigger. I read those messages 3 times before they truly sank in. My son had robbed me, broken my trust, and then run off like a coward. I tried calling him straight to voicemail. I checked his room. Empty. Clothes gone, computer gone, all those pricey gadgets he'd somehow collected over the past year gone. On his pillow lay a handwritten note. Mom, I know you're angry now, but someday you'll understand. I can't stay in this small-minded place any longer. You raised me to settle for scraps, but I want more. I want a life that matters. Don't contact me until you're ready to support my dreams instead of crushing them. P.S. That emergency fund wasn't really for emergencies anyway. You were just afraid to live. At least now it's being used for something important. Tyler. I crumpled the note and hurled it across the room. Then I sat on his bed and cried harder than I had since the night his father walked out 15 years earlier. The weeks that followed were some of the darkest of my life. Without that emergency cushion, I couldn't keep up with rent. My landlord, Mrs. Patterson, gave me 2 weeks to catch up, or she'd have no choice but to evict me. I started missing shifts at the diner, too many nights spent crying, too many mornings oversleeping. After showing up late for the 3rd time, my manager, Joe, pulled me aside. Gloria, You're one of my best workers, but I can't keep covering for you. What's going on? I couldn't bring myself to tell him the truth that my own son had stolen from me and left me behind. The shame was crushing. Just some family issues, I muttered. I'll get it together. But I wasn't getting it together. Most nights I found myself standing in Tyler's empty room, replaying every choice I'd ever made. Had I really been too negative, too small-minded, like he said? Maybe he'd been right all along. Eventually, I had no choice but to leave our apartment. I moved into a cramped studio on the other side of town, where the walls were so thin I could hear my neighbors fighting through the night. To make ends meet, I picked up a third job cleaning office buildings after hours. My days blurred together: diner shifts, janitorial work, a few hours of restless sleep, and then back at it again. 3 months after Tyler disappeared, I was wiping down tables at the diner when I noticed an older man sitting in the corner booth. He'd been coming in every Tuesday and Thursday for weeks. Always the same order: coffee, wheat toast, and scrambled eggs. But unlike most customers, he actually looked at me when I served him. Really looked like I was more than just someone refilling cups. "You work too hard," he said one Thursday evening as I poured his coffee. I let out a laugh, though it came out bitter. Bills don't pay themselves. "I'm Vincent Romano," he said, extending his hand. His grip was strong, calloused, the kind of hands that had seen years of real work. I used to own Romano Construction before I retired. "Gloria Martinez," I replied, "and I know who you are. Your company built half this town." Vincent smiled, hopefully the better half. Then he studied my face closely. "You look tired, Gloria, really tired." Something in his kind voice nearly undid me right there in the middle of the dinner rush. "It's been a rough year," I admitted quietly. "Want to talk about it?" I shook my head. "You don't want to hear my problems. Try me." Maybe it was because I was so starved for real connection, but I found myself opening up to him. Not everything, but enough. I told him about Tyler leaving, about struggling to cover rent, about feeling like I'd failed as a mother. Vincent listened without judgment, just nodding now and then. When I finally stopped, he was quiet for a long moment. "My wife died 2 years ago," he said softly. "Cancer. We never had children, though we wanted them desperately. I would have given anything to have a son or daughter, even one who broke my heart." He looked me straight in the eye. "Some people don't deserve the love they're given, Gloria. That isn't your fault." Before I could respond, he laid a $50 bill on the table to cover his $12 meal and walked out. The following week, Vincent returned. This time he stayed until closing, just talking. He told me about Maria, his late wife, and how together they'd built their company from nothing. He'd grown up poor in Fresno, worked construction since he was 16, saved every penny until he could buy his own tools and start a business. "Maria used to say I worked too much," he said with a wistful smile. "She was probably right, but we wanted to build something that would last." "Did you?" I asked. "The business, yes, but what good is success if you have no one to share it with?" Over the months that followed, Vincent became a steady presence in my life. He'd show up during my breaks, always with a cup of coffee from the good cafe downtown, not the burnt stuff we served at the diner. When my beat-up car finally gave out, he covered the repairs before I could even ask. When I protested, he just shrugged. "Friends help friends. Gloria, let me be your friend." I wasn't used to kindness that didn't come with strings attached. Tyler had always made me feel like I owed him something just for being my son. His father had made love feel like a burden I could never carry right. But Vincent, he was different. He never made me feel small. He never made me feel like I should be grateful for scraps. About 6 months into our friendship, he waited until the diner was nearly empty one evening. "Gloria, I need to tell you something," he said, his voice unsteady for the first time since I'd met him. My stomach dropped. Here it comes, I thought, the catch, the favor, the thing he really wanted from me. But what he said instead left me speechless. "I'm falling in love with you." He said it so simply, like it was the most natural truth in the world. I know it probably sounds crazy. I'm 68, set in my ways, probably too old to be starting over. But you make me feel alive again. I couldn't find words. "I'm not asking for an answer tonight," he continued quickly. "I just needed you to know. You deserve to know you're worth loving, Gloria, really loving. Not the kind of love that comes with conditions." That night, back in my tiny studio, I looked at myself in the mirror for the first time in months. Really looked. I saw a woman who had been beaten down by life, but who was still standing. A woman who had given everything to people who didn't deserve it, but somehow still had love left to give. Maybe Vincent was right. Maybe I was worth loving after all. 3 weeks later, I said yes, not to marriage, not yet, but to letting someone care for me without waiting for the other shoe to drop. Our first date was at Romano's, the upscale Italian place downtown that required reservations. I'd never eaten in a restaurant that fancy before. I wore the one good dress I owned, the black one I'd bought for job interviews years ago, and still felt completely out of place. "You look beautiful," Vincent said when he picked me up. And for the first time in a long while, I believed it. Over candlelight, he told me more about his life, how he'd started his company with nothing but a rusty pickup and a toolbox, how he and Maria had lived in a trailer on job sites for the first 10 years, saving every dime until the business took off. "We were going to travel once we retired," he said softly. "See Europe, take the cruise Maria always dreamed about. But the cancer came too fast. I'm so sorry," I whispered. "Don't be. Just be here with me now." That's what Maria would have wanted. Vincent courted me like I was something precious. Flowers would show up at the diner with my name on them. Little notes appeared under my windshield wipers. On my days off, he'd surprise me with picnics at Kern River Park, and never once did he pressure me for anything more than my company. 6 months later, he invited me to see his home for the first time. It sat on 5 acres outside Bakersfield, a sprawling ranch-style house with a 3-car garage and a swimming pool I'd only ever seen in magazines. I stood in the marble entryway whispering, "This is too much. This is just a house, Gloria," he said gently. "It's been empty since Maria died. Houses need people in them to mean something." He showed me the overgrown garden Maria once tended, her sewing room still untouched. Photos of their 43 years together, young and broke, successful and gray-haired, everything in between. "I'm not trying to replace her," I said carefully. "And I'm not trying to replace Tyler," Vincent answered. "We both loved people who couldn't love us the way we deserved. But that doesn't mean we stopped deserving love." A year after our first date, he proposed. Not in some grand spectacle, but right there at his usual booth in the diner after my shift. "Marry me, Gloria," he said simply. "Let's build something together." "I don't have anything to bring to a marriage," I whispered. No money, no property, no degrees. You have you, he said. That's all I want. We married in the courthouse on a Thursday morning. Vincent wore his best suit. I wore a simple blue dress we picked out together. The only witnesses were Frank Morrison, his lawyer, and Joe, my manager from the diner. It wasn't grand, but it was ours. The night before the wedding, I'd asked for a prenup. Vincent looked at me like I'd suggested jumping off a cliff. Absolutely not. Vincent, you're worth millions. I work at a truck stop diner. People will think I'm a gold digger. Let them. When I say till death do us part, I mean everything I have is ours. End of story. Moving into Vincent's house felt surreal. The master bath was larger than my old studio. The kitchen had granite counters and appliances so modern I was afraid to touch them. I kept waiting for someone to tell me I didn't belong. But Vincent was patient. He showed me how to use the coffee machine, teased me when I hung my diner uniforms next to his expensive suits. It's our house now, he'd remind me whenever I looked overwhelmed. Little by little, I quit my extra jobs. First the night cleaning shift, then eventually the diner. For the first time in decades, I had time to breathe. I could read books, tend Maria's garden, cook something besides greasy diner food. Vincent slowly introduced me to his world charity galas, business dinners, the country club. I felt out of place in those designer dresses he bought me, but he never let me feel alone. He'd hold my hand, whisper encouragement when some society wife gave me the side eye. You belong here because you're with me, he'd say. And you're twice the woman any of them will ever be. The best part wasn't the house or the money. It was how Vincent looked at me every morning like I was the best thing that had ever happened to him. He'd bring me coffee in bed, kiss my forehead, and say, "Good morning, beautiful wife." For 5 years, I felt like the luckiest woman alive. We traveled Italy, where Vincent wept at his grandfather's grave in Sicily. Ireland, where I discovered good wine didn't taste anything like the cheap stuff I'd known. Mexico, where Vincent suggested renewing our vows at sunset on the beach, just because he felt like marrying me again. Sometimes I thought about Tyler. Wondered if he'd struck it rich with those investments he'd bragged about. But over time, the sting softened into pity. He'd traded away a mother's love for a gamble, while I'd found a man who cherished me like treasure. Vincent told me once as we watched the sunset from our pool, some people only come back when they want something. Don't let anyone who doesn't deserve it mess up the life you've built. I should have listened. Vincent's stroke came on an ordinary Tuesday in March. 1 minute he was grumbling about the mayor's new traffic plan over breakfast. The next he was slumped in his chair, coffee spilling across the paper. I dialed 911 with shaking hands, rattling off his medical history as the paramedics rushed him away. They told me I'd done everything right, but nothing could have prepared me for seeing him hooked up to machines, his life hanging in the balance. The next 72 hours are critical, Dr. Patel explained. The stroke was massive. Even if he survives, there may be permanent impairment. I didn't leave his side for 3 days. I held his hand, talked to him about our summer trip to Alaska, reminded him of all the plans we'd made. The nurses begged me to go home and rest, but I couldn't risk him waking up alone. On the 4th day, his eyes opened. "Gloria," he whispered, voice weak and slurred. "I'm here, baby, right here." But confusion clouded his gaze. "Everything's fuzzy." The doctors warned me he'd suffered significant brain damage. Some days he was almost himself, Other days he couldn't remember my name. Sometimes he called out for Maria, his first wife. Other times he got agitated, searching for work boots he thought he needed for a job site. This is common, Dr. Patel reassured me. Memory lapses, confusion, they may improve with time. But instead of improving, Vincent slipped further away. After 2 weeks in the hospital, I brought him home with full-time nurses. Our beautiful house turned into a makeshift hospital, the air filled with antiseptic, and the steady beep of machines. That's when Tyler showed up. I was in the kitchen making lunch when the doorbell rang. Vincent was upstairs, restless in his sleep, a nurse watching over him. When I opened the door, I nearly collapsed. Tyler stood there in a sharp suit, carrying himself like a man who hadn't known hardship in years. "Hello, Mom." I clutched the doorframe to steady myself. "Tyler, I heard about Vincent. I came as soon as I could." "You heard? How?" He stepped closer, the smell of expensive cologne clinging to him. "I've been keeping tabs on you, making sure you were okay. I know I left badly, and I regret it every day." It had been 10 years since I'd last seen him. I tried calling, he continued, "but your number had changed." I didn't want to barge in, but when I heard Vincent was sick, I stared at him, this polished stranger wearing my son's face. Part of me wanted to slam the door, part of me wanted to collapse into his arms. But mostly, I just felt tired. "You look good," I managed. He smiled, for a brief moment resembling the boy who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. "I've done well, Mom. That investment I told you about, it paid off big. Can I come in? I'd like to see Vincent, and we've got a lot to catch up on." Every instinct in me screamed not to, but I stepped aside. Upstairs, Vincent was awake, gazing out at Maria's overgrown garden. The nurse adjusted his fore. "Vincent, honey," I said gently. "You have a visitor. This is Tyler, my son." Vincent turned his head slowly, eyes trying to focus. "Tyler," he murmured. "It's good to meet you, sir," Tyler said, reaching for his hand. "I'm sorry it's under these circumstances." Vincent frowned. "Do I know you?" "This is Gloria's son," the nurse explained kindly. "He's come to visit." Vincent's face softened. "She talks about you all the time." "Where have you been?" The question cut like a knife. "I've been living in Miami," Tyler said smoothly. "Working. I should have come sooner." "Miami," Vincent repeated slowly. "That's far." For the next hour, Tyler sat by his bed, listening to Vincent's rambling stories of old job sites and Maria's cooking. He was patient, even kind, laughing at Vincent's confused memories. When we went back downstairs, he said quietly, "He seems like a good man, the best I've ever known." Tyler nodded, face thoughtful. "Mom, I need you to know how sorry I am for everything, for how I left, for what I said. I was young and angry. I hate myself for taking your emergency fund. But I've been paying it back with interest." He pulled out his phone, showing me a bank account. "There's over $50,000 in here. It's yours." I stared, barely believing. I made millions, Mom. Crypto was just the start. Real estate, tech startups. I'm not that broke kid anymore. I want to take care of you." I swallowed hard. "Why now, Tyler? Why come back now?" His expression grew serious. "Because Vincent's dying, isn't he? And you're going to need family when he's gone." A chill ran through me, but I pushed it aside. This was my son, my only child. "You can stay in your old room, if you want." I heard myself say. Tyler smiled. I'd like that very much. For the next 3 weeks, Tyler stayed with us. And I'll admit, they were some of the smoothest days I'd had since Vincent's stroke. Tyler helped with everything, researching treatments, coordinating with doctors, even covering night shifts, so I could finally sleep more than a couple of hours. He was patient with Vincent, gentle when confusion set in, and seemed genuinely interested in his old construction stories. I started to wonder if maybe I'd been wrong. Maybe my son really had changed. One evening, after a rough day, I told him, "You're a good son, Tyler." He looked up from his laptop, where he'd been reading about experimental therapies. "I'm just trying to make up for lost time, Mom. I know I can't erase the past, but I want to be here now." Vincent passed away on a Thursday night in April, exactly 3 weeks after Tyler returned. I was holding his hand when it happened. Tyler stood at the foot of the bed, quiet. Vincent had been unconscious for 2 days, his breathing shallow, every rise and fall more labored than the last. Just before midnight, he squeezed my hand one final time and whispered, "Tell Gloria, don't trust." His voice faded before he could finish. "Don't trust what, baby?" I begged. But he was gone. Tyler rested a hand on my shoulder. "He probably meant he trusts you to be okay without him." That's what I'd want to tell you. I wanted so badly to believe that. I needed to believe that. The funeral was held at St. Catherine's, the church where Vincent and I had sat together every Sunday. The pews overflowed, workers, friends, people whose lives he'd touched. Frank Morrison, his lawyer, spoke about Vincent's integrity and generosity. I stood at the podium, voice breaking as I shared how Vincent had saved me by showing me what real love looked like. Tyler sat in the front row beside me, hand clasped around mine. He wore a black suit that fit him too perfectly, played the part of grieving son so well that people whispered how lucky I was to have him there. After the burial, the house filled with mourners for the reception. Tyler poured drinks, chatted with Vincent's business associates, and carried himself like he belonged. For a fleeting moment, I felt proud of him, until I overheard his voice in the living room. It was colder now, businesslike. "The will reading is set for Monday. My attorney will be there to represent my interests." My stomach lurched. I stepped into the room, finding him with his phone in hand, standing before Vincent's portrait. He quickly ended the call when he saw me. "Who was that?" I asked. "Just business, Mom. Nothing important." But the look on his face chilled me. "Tyler, what attorney? What interests?" He sat down in Vincent's old recliner, clasping his hands. "Mom, we need to talk practicalities. Vincent's gone. You'll need help managing the estate. That's why I'm here. Frank Morrison is handling everything." Vincent made sure I'd be okay. Tyler leaned forward. "Mom, I've been doing research. California law is clear about inheritance rights. As Vincent's stepson, I have legal claims." The room tilted. "You are not his stepson," I snapped. "You didn't even meet him until 3 weeks ago. I'm your son. You were his wife. That makes me his stepson under the law." My attorney confirmed it. "You hired an attorney." My voice shook. I had to protect our interests. Vincent was worth over $15 million. That money could take care of us both forever. I stared at him, this man who carried my blood but sounded like a stranger. "Vincent left everything to me. Frank explained it years ago. Wills can be contested," Tyler said smoothly, "especially when surviving stepchildren weren't considered. I'm not being greedy, Mom. I'm planning for your future. What happens when you need long-term care? You'll want family around to help manage things responsibly. I whispered, You just want Vincent's money. It's what's fair, he insisted, and I want to make sure you're protected. He moved closer, his voice softening again. Rich people don't stay rich by being careless. Vincent would want his legacy handled properly. You didn't even know him. I got to know him these last weeks, Tyler argued. He taught me about business, about building wealth. He'd want family to carry it forward. At that moment, Frank Morrison walked in, coffee in hand, eyes weary. Tyler Martinez, my son, said coolly. Gloria's son. Vincent's stepson. Frank's brows shot up. Vincent never mentioned a stepson. We were estranged. But blood is blood. Family is family. Actually, Frank said slowly, that's not how inheritance law works. But we'll discuss it at the will reading Monday. He turned to me. Gloria, are you okay? I looked at Tyler, really looked, and everything snapped into focus. The expensive suits. The perfect timing. The way he'd asked so many questions about Vincent's assets. His patience at Vincent's bedside hadn't been love. It had been an investment. No, I said quietly. I don't think I am okay. Tyler must have heard something in my tone, because his expression shifted back into that of a concerned son. Mom, I can see you're upset. This isn't how I wanted to bring it up. But we're family. We should be working together, not against each other. Family, I repeated. Like when you stole my emergency fund and vanished for 10 years. That was different. I was young, reckless. And now you're older, clever enough to time your return for when Vincent was at his weakest. His mask slipped then, and the cold truth showed. Vincent was dying anyway, Mom. At least this way, his money can help people who are still alive. Frank Morrison stepped in between us. This conversation will wait until Monday. Tyler, I suggest you find somewhere else to stay until then. This is my mother's house. Tyler shot back. This is Gloria's house, Frank corrected firmly, and she decides who stays. I looked at my son, this stranger, who had pretended long enough to position himself for Vincent's wealth, and made my choice. Get out, Mom. You're emotional. You're not thinking clearly. Get out of my house, Tyler. Now. He stared at me for a long beat, then shrugged. Fine, but this isn't over. I'll see you Monday with my attorney. When he left, the silence felt heavier than grief itself. How bad is this going to get? I whispered. Frank sighed. That depends on how well Vincent knew your son. Monday came far too soon. I sat in Frank's conference room, hands trembling as I waited for the will reading. Tyler walked in with his attorney, a woman in a sharp suit who looked like she could chew nails for breakfast. They sat across from me, not as family, but as adversaries. Before we began, Frank addressed the elephant in the room. Tyler, you've claimed inheritance rights as Vincent's stepson. Correct. That's right, Tyler said confidently. California law says stepchildren have inheritance rights if not excluded from a will, and you believe Vincent would have provided for you if he'd lived longer. Frank asked. Absolutely. Vincent and I connected in those final weeks. He saw I was rebuilding my relationship with my mother. Tyler's attorney leaned forward. My client has a legitimate claim. The will predates his reconciliation. Had Mr. Romano known, he would have made provisions. Frank nodded mildly, then pulled out a thick folder. Interesting theory. Let's see what Vincent thought. He opened the document. This is a codicil to Vincent's will, dated 1 week before his death. Shall I read the relevant section? My heart pounded. Tyler went pale. Regarding Tyler Martinez, Frank read aloud, "Son of my beloved wife, Gloria, I have observed this young man during his recent stay. While he presents himself as changed, seeking reconciliation, his true motives have become clear." Tyler started to protest, but his attorney gripped his arm. The room fell silent except for Tyler's heavy breathing. Frank locked eyes with Tyler. Tyler shot to his feet. "That's impossible. You can't strip someone of inheritance based on assumptions. Sit down," his attorney hissed. But Tyler was unraveling. Additionally, Frank went on, Vincent provided video evidence of Tyler's deception. He clicked a button on his laptop. Suddenly, Tyler's voice filled the room. The recording stopped. Tyler stared at the laptop like it had betrayed him. Vincent had a security system installed after his stroke. Frank explained. Every conversation in that house was recorded. Tyler's attorney quietly packed her briefcase. "I'm withdrawing from this case immediately." Frank pulled out one more page. Tears blurred my eyes, but they were tears of relief. Even in his final weeks, Vincent had seen through Tyler's act. Tyler slammed his hand on the table. "This is fraud. He was incompetent." Tyler turned to me, desperate. "Mom, you can't let this happen. That money should be ours. We're family." I looked at him, the man who shared my DNA but nothing else. "Family doesn't steal from each other and disappear for 10 years, I said softly. "Family doesn't come back only when someone's dying. Family doesn't pretend to love while plotting to rob you." "I am your son," he shouted. "No," I said, standing tall. "My son died the day he chose money over love. You're just someone who looks like him." 6 months later, I stood at a podium inside the new engineering building at Bakersfield Community College. Before me sat the very first class of Vincent and Maria Romano scholars, 12 young students, all from working-class families, each chasing degrees in construction management and civil engineering. After the ceremony, a young woman named Isabella came up to me. She reminded me of myself at her age, tired but determined, juggling jobs just to keep her family afloat. "Mrs. Romano," she said softly, "thank you for believing in us. This scholarship means everything." Vincent believed in people who help themselves and their families, I told her. "That's all you need to do, build something good." That evening, driving home, I passed the old Roadhouse diner where I'd once worked those endless double shifts. Through the window I spotted Joe, my old manager, wiping down the counter. He waved, and I waved back. I'd stopped in a few times since Vincent's death, not as an employee anymore, but as a friend. I never saw Tyler again. Frank later told me he tried hiring other attorneys to contest the will, but Vincent's evidence was airtight. Eventually, he gave up and disappeared, maybe to chase another scheme, maybe to find another family to exploit. I don't miss him. The boy I once loved, the one who needed his mother, had been gone long before that will reading. The man who stood in his place was just a stranger wearing his face. I kept Vincent's house, though most of the expensive things went to charity. These days, I drive his old pickup instead of the luxury sedan. Every morning, I tend Maria's garden, pulling weeds and planting new life. 3 days a week, I volunteer at the college, helping manage the scholarship fund. People sometimes ask if I feel lonely in that big house all by myself, but the truth is, I'm not alone. I'm surrounded by Vincent's love, by memories of what real partnership feels like, and by the certainty that I finally learned to value myself the way he valued me. Tyler taught me that love isn't guaranteed, not even from family. But Vincent taught me something far more important. I deserve love without conditions. And I deserve to protect that love from anyone who would use it against me. The best revenge isn't hurting someone who hurt you. It's building a life so rich and full that their absence becomes a blessing instead of a loss. And that's exactly what I did. So that's my story. Was I too harsh kicking Tyler out? Or should family always get one more chance? I'll let you be the judge. But I know this much: Vincent was right. Some people don't deserve the love they're given. And some people are worth loving until your very last breath.